Today is June 19th, 2007. I am Cassie Potasic, and it is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Rugby, North Dakota. Can you please tell me your full name?
Elizabeth Ann Miltenberger. But my name Miltenberger is so long I always I spelled E-L-I-Z, and everybody calls me Liz.
Okay.
And so with Miltenberger, it's a long name.
What's your maiden name?
Bosch. B-O-S-C-H.
Okay. When and where were you born?
8 miles south of Rugby. At Grandpa's farm. Grandpa Bosch's farm.
Okay. When?
In February 1915.
Okay. Have you ever heard an interesting story about your birth?
Well, I know I was born at Grandpa's farm, and then when my mother got sick, they took all Roy and Lena and Pius and them and Clara. They had to go down to my mother's home and stay there. They've told me that. And then when I was the first granddaughter, and they've talked and laughed about that,
Okay. Was there a midwife or a doctor there when you were born?
I had a woman, Mrs. L. was the doctor. That was, everybody used her,
Okay, can you share your earliest memory with us?
Such as,
Anything. What's the earliest thing you remember?
oh my, oh my, oh my. I can remember my sister was born in 1919.
Okay.
We had Mrs. Barch for midwife, and we lived in Silva, so I can remember that far back.
All right. Well, can you tell me a little bit about your family? Do you remember your grandparents?
Oh, yes. I was grandma's, they were my everything, my great life, They built a new house in 1919, and big, beautiful house, and now it's Richard Smalls lives there. We go there to visit once in a while. And it was a great life, but I don't see how I can tell that all. I know one thing, he was always well-to-do, they always had a crop, and you see, Grandpa moved to Berwick in 1894. My dad was born there. And, well, it just seems like one day he fell in the tub and he had to stay in bed till the shirt was dry. He didn't have 2 shirts. He only had 2 shirts, that's all he had. So he had to stay in bed till the shirt was dry. And I know they lived in Berwick then, and Grandpa was a railroad man, And then the work was so hard for him that he quit the job and he bought a farm, that farm that they have now. That's where they live now, where they lived. And I guess I'm a very poor talker. They lived there I got all that literature wrote down where about the family.
What was your grandfather's name?
Simon Bosch.
Can you tell me what kind of person he was?
A very nice person. I just read about his funeral thing, you know, what they put in the paper, and everybody said he was such a nice person. And my mother used to say how nice he was. And he was railroad, after he got off the railroad, you know, he bought this farm, and then he was a school board tax collector, and he got all kinds of school work, like in a, God, I didn't know I was such a poor talker.
No, you're doing fine.
And they had a lot of children, but a lot of them died, and then there was John, there was an Antone and a Clara and a Phyllis, and Roy and Lena, Pius, that were living, the rest. So I've got it all wrote down in the book, but
Okay. What was your grandmother's name?
what's the grandmother's name? She was Elizabeth Koenig,
Can you spell that last name for me?
Koenig, Koenig.
Okay.
Yeah, and her father and mother lived with him for a while, and they came over at the same time from Russia. In 1890, they all came over together, 2 families. And they got married on the ship.
Really?
Yeah. And then they went to Amos County. And then from Amos County, they went to move to Bismarck. Let's see, what was it? 1894. That's when my dad was born that year. They moved to Bismarck. And then my grandpa was his son, you know. My dad was his son, Simon. Martin was the main man, you know, my great-grandfather. And then he moved to Berwick, and then they moved on the farm, you know, to begin it, right, you know.
Where in Russia were they from?
Pardon?
What part of Russia were they from?
Russia? Crimea. Crimea, something like that.
Okay.
And we talked different German than those other people. Other people all had different brogues, you know. But they used to laugh at us when we talked German, so that I quit talking German. I can talk German real good, but I have never used it in very many years. And I'm 92 now. Quit talking German.
Did they ever tell you any stories other than getting married on the ship about their crossing over?
You know, if you read over the book, I got a whole literature on that. They were the well-to-do people. They always were well-to-do. I hear other people talking how the Germans from Russia came in and took away everything from them. They didn't do that to my folks. I don't know why. Maybe they left sooner, before they got too bad or something. But you see, there were Germans, and they went into Russia, and they had this little paradise there. And they became well-to-do, and when this Catherine was the queen, the queen. She was a good queen and it was good to all the people and gave them land and let them come in and move there. Then when she died, her son was mean and he took everything away from them and killed them if they didn't listen. That's what happened to my mother's folks on my mother's side.
Can you tell me about them? Do you know anything about them?
Well, they came over to Russia and went to Amos County, but they were poor all the time. And then, you know, they're people from Harvey, my mother's brothers. Two of them married the sisters of this man by the name of Goldaddy, or I'd have to read it, look it up. I don't really know his last name. And they took her husband away from him and they chopped his hands off. They buried him right there. The friends had to dig holes and he buried him there. And then this guy from Harvey went over and got this woman and married her. And she had 3 daughters. And then she married my Uncle Pete and Martin Hofford married one, and Sylvester Wohler married the other one. They're all my uncles and aunts in the Hofford side.
Okay. Where did your grandparents live when you were growing up? Both sets.
Which one? Well, the Bosches were married 8 miles south of Rugby, and the Hoffords were about 15 miles further south, north, southeast, or southwest, more likely.
Okay.
He took homesteading. He landed up and homesteaded there. And he already had taken some up at Amos County, so he can take that up. So he put his daughter on there, Agnes. She was Agnes, his daughter, Agnes John. And they put up smokestacks so they could own the land.
Okay. Have you ever heard any other stories about their homesteading?
Oh yeah, a lot of them, but I don't know the names of it or remember them.
Okay.
But that's how they did it. And then they had the cow in the house. And they milked and they slept in there and everything. In this little sod house, you know. And they were wonderful people. They always had beautiful garden. Grandpa Hofford was a hard worker. And Grandma had always had the Bible on her lap. And those people are still going to church. All those Hofford people are very faithful, very religious. They're all dead and gone, her children. I haven't got none left of them. A lot of cousins I got left. They're very quiet people. I try to do a family tree, I can't get nothing out of them.
Now, was religion important to all of your grandparents?
Well, that's the Hoffords now I'm talking about. And the Bosches are all gone. They're all dead and gone. And then there's getting the wall side. Well, he came over here when he was 18 years old, and he married Teresa Keller. So there's Kellers and Miltenbergers. It's on the wall side. But I don't know much about their pioneer life.
Okay.
That he had a brother, and he lived in Towner. And he died real young. And the wife died when she had the baby, and then the Miltenbergers adopted it, Georgie. And the father died, he had got appendix, you know, so that baby had no mother, no dad. That was, his name was Joe Miltenberger. That was Walt's only uncle over here. He had an aunt in Devil's Lake that came over, but
Okay. Can you tell me anything about your aunts and uncles when you were growing up?
well, lots of good ones.
Who was your favorite?
Well, he died real young. His Uncle John, Bosch. And there's an Uncle John Hofford, too, that was real good to the family. And my mother's brother. And they helped us a lot. He had a good wife. You know, there you get into a spell of talking. I had so many of them, you know.
Do you remember any stories in particular about any of them?
Well, I had this young aunt. She was 9 months younger than I am, older than I am. And we were pals all our lives. She even moved to Rugby and lived in my apartment.
What was her name?
Lena Bosch. And Roy, he moved to Texas and sold the farm. He had the farm. Then he moved to Texas. John, he moved to Fargo and died. And that's about it. There was Antone and a Phyllis, but they all went out west. And then the Hoffords, most of them stayed around here. But they weren't great mixers. We never mixed very much with them. Hardly knew them. But we moved to Knox. There was this man, John Gaffrey. He got us a farm. We didn't have a crop for 5 years, and we got so poor. And this John Gaffrey got us this farm in Knox, and that was our happiest day in life. He got Mr. Steen, Oscar Steen, to give us that farm, and we rented that farm. And we moved down there in 1933, and he let us have his sheep and the wool off the sheep if we took care of the sheep. And we always had beautiful gardens, good crops, and we lived only a fourth of a mile from school. And all the kids but me got to go to high school. I was 18 then, see, and I had quit school. I had to stay home all the time and work. And it was easy for me to sew. One day I counted 16 dresses that I sewed for the girls.
In one day?
Oh no, washed them and dried them one day, but they happened to hang. I happened to count them because they were hanging on the clothesline. But I remember that. I sewed for my sisters. I had 4 sisters. We were 12 kids in the family.
And were you the oldest?
And I was the oldest. And one little brother died when he was 2 years old. He had leukemia.
What was his name?
Leonard. Yeah, then there was Leo. He was in the army for 5 years in Germany, in Europe, in England, and
Can you tell me the birth order of your siblings?
pardon?
Can you list your siblings in order for me?
Yeah, I can. See, I was first, and it's Margaret, and Leo, Lena, Helen, Pete, George, and Joe, and Darlene, and Bobby. I think I got them all. Forgot Leonard. Leonard is in the middle of Joe and Darlene.
Okay.
Yeah. Just think, there's only Bobby and Darlene and Joe left.
Really?
They just really died these last 4 years. All died.
Must be hard.
Yeah. And Margaret had one, she married a man, he was an Air Force man, had one little girl, and he died in the service. Flew over, I forget what country it was now when they shot him down. Lena was never married. She lived in Minot as a cook in the restaurant there, you know. Then she went to the nursing home. And Helen, she was married to Elmer Frick. Frick, his name is Frick. She had 2 sons. And Pete never was married. Well, he was married, but he married a woman with 5 boys, 5 children. And they were divorced. And George got married to Ruth, and they had 1 boy, and they adopted 1 girl. And Darlene, she had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. And then Bobby, he married a woman with 7 children. And they had 3 of their own. They live on a farm in Knox. All good kids.
Are there any interesting stories about when your siblings were born that you remember?
When mine were born?
Yep.
Well, I suppose they're all interesting. Well, Leona was first, and she was born out on the farm when we were living with Walt's folks. She was born, and we moved on the farm. Then we moved to town. He bought out the dray line. And then Ronnie was born in 1937. And then Woody was born in 39. Then Jerry was born in 41. And Theo was born in 43. And then Patty came along. She's the baby. She was born in 47. And then we moved to Rugby in 52. And we moved to this house. I didn't want to move to this house. I wanted to move close to the church. But Walter insisted that we gotta have this house.
Why is that?
Huh?
Why did he want
I
this?
don't know. He never very seldom gave me a hard time about anything, but he wanted this house. And can you imagine, after 52, we bought, what made us move up here was his sister married a chiropractor, Doc Kuhn, and he sold Walt the building. And then we rented it out to a guy that turned it into a locker plant. And then he turned it into, it was a locker plant when we got it. And then when we moved up here, we turned it into a butcher shop. We went into the butchering business. It was a locker plant and butchering kind of goes together. And that was in 33. No, that was not in 33. In 52. And then he got interested in bought a grocery store. Tony Sitter's place. And the Rizooks had the grocery store, and they were going to quit, and so Walt bought that. So we had a locker plant and a grocery store. Couldn't hardly make it, we couldn't do very well. But we had some very good friends, Mr. and Mrs. Charlie Wirtz. They wanted to adopt Walt all the time. They liked him. But he always wanted to borrow money, and that guy had a lot of money. And one day he called me, took me along down to see the Charlie Wirtzes. And Charlie took me in a corner and he said, I want to help Walt, he said. And I want to borrow money, and I've got a lot of money, and he needs it, and I want to help him. And you're not supposed to see, I wouldn't let Walt borrow money. I didn't want to borrow money. And he borrowed us money. We bought the butcher locker plant. We bought the store. And of course, he always paid back. He paid it back, but he helped us, And all of a sudden, one day, right in this house, Theo was a little girl about, she could have been 12 years old. She come home. Walt had run against the sheriff to be a sheriff, and he lost by 62 points. But then Theo come home and she said, Mother, the Seversons are still going to move. Mr. Severson is a sick man. They're going to go out west. And that little girl was so sharp. She heard his son talking, and she told me that they're going to move out west and the sheriff's job is empty. And I told Walt, you go out and see that county commissioner was, God help me remember his name. If I can remember the county commissioner's name, he's a good man. And Walt went out to see him, and he hired him, and we moved in there without being elected. Just moved in there. So then he was a sheriff. Then he got rid of the store, sold it to Joe. Joe. I can't think of his name now. Can you imagine? That's why my brain works that way. Can't think of people. And then we sold the locker plant. We rented it out. We didn't sell it, we just rented it out. Because I was stuck with that afterwards. I had to sell it. And then he was sheriff for 12 years. See, and then Lee got married, Ronnie got married, Woody got married, Jerry got married, Theo got married, Patty got married, all in the sheriff's office during that time. Then we lived there till 1975. Was it 75? Something like that. 12 years we were there. We moved in 1959. We moved to the sheriff's office. And in 1970, we moved out of there. Something like that. Then, of course, he lost the election to, if I can remember his name, now I can't remember his name. Anyway, we had a real rough time in that sheriff's office.
Oh, yeah?
I'd like to show you pictures. I've got pictures where some kids that broke, we let them out. They went to Minot. They had been in jail for a long time, and we became friends. And Jerry was in Korea at the time, my son, and I was real lonesome because he was in the war and that. And these kids would be in jail, and I always be glad Jerry wasn't in there. He was in the war, but I was betting, I say it myself, he's better off in Korea than here, in jail. And Ronnie got a job. He had been in the service, and even got out, and he went and he was working in Minot. And Woody was going to school and working at a store, the Red House store, and he got married in 1961. Come home and got married, and then he was a butcher in Botno. Jerry was in Korea. Theo was still going to high school. She became queen in school. She was always very popular. And Patty couldn't stand it in rugby. They all blamed her for all the things that went wrong. If anybody just spilled a cup of coffee or something, they said Patty did it. She went to Willow City to school. She put herself there. I didn't make her go there. Walt didn't make her go there. And some other parents put their kids there. They had this Willow City school. It was a Notre Dame school, run by sisters. And she went to school there and finished school there. But anyway, we had these boys in jail. And I told them to go and see Ronnie and he'll give them a job. So they drove around and around, couldn't find Ronnie. They got to some uncle's place. They found a gun. You know how young some kids are, They got caught by some policemen for some reason. They were going to chase them. And they chased them out to the Smalls's place, shoemaker place on the farm. And they held those people up by gun. The two boys' name was Bobby, Robert, and I can't think of the other boy's name. He's a colored boy. And then the cops chased them, and they come back to Rugby. Wanted to get in our jail and get it back home to us again. And they got into some farmers' homes, held them up at gun, different farmers' homes. Finally got into one home out here. Those people have moved away too now, and somebody else is living there. And they called me on the phone. I was the only one home. And it was on May the 30th. We had graduation night, and I had my hair in curlers. And, I was going to go to that doings, and I happened to be the only one home, and the phone rang, and I can't think of his name. He called and he said, Mrs. Miltenberger, we're out here with these people, and we'll give up if get Walt to come out with the sheriff car, all alone. I said, that can't be. I said, we've got rules that Walt cannot come alone. He's got to have can Bud Miller go with him? He said, no, they don't like Bud. Can Singer go with him? No, they didn't like Singer. Well, I said, well, then I'll come along. He said, well, that's okay if you come. So I went out and I found Walt. I said, Walt, I know where they are. They searched for him for 3 days. And I saw Walt and I said, I know where they are. They told me where they are, but I can't have nobody go along. Just you and I can go. Walt said, and the other officer was a sheriff from my town there. He got mad and he cussed and he swore. He said, that can't be. And I said, well, it has to be. And so we drove out. Walt and I drove out in front of the gate. Then there was a man standing by the gate, was the hired man. they thought if you have anybody else in there, they wouldn't let us in. And so they saw it was me, then they let him in. We drove in front of the car, went in the house, and Walt took the gun from the kid. They had those parents, those people on the gun on her back. I went in, I grabbed him by the neck, I held him, hugged him, you know. I said, what in the world's the matter with you guys? What makes you do these things? And Walt got the other guy, and they were both going to get in the back seat, and I said, no, one's got to sit in the front seat, and I'm going to sit in the back seat with the other one. I was buzzing all these things. Walt, he just listened. He just obeyed. Because then he took out the microphone, was going to tell them we're on the way. I said we won't do that. We promised them we're going to put him right in jail, and they don't want to see any other officers. They were in rags. They'd been in Culver's and you know, rough looking, you know. And they didn't want to be bothered. They was tired. And so then Walt put him in jail and put the key in his pocket so nobody could go in and see him. Boy, I was upset. I went to bed, and we had them in jail. And Walt talked it over with all the others, and the manhunt was over with. It was a manhunt for 3 days. So they did that. They both got prison. Then we wrote letters back and forth to them. They got out of prison. They come back to see us. I know they went down south. They got found places for them where they stayed, and we never heard from them again. But that was a rough deal. And the worst one was when Louis Mattern shot the cops. He shot our best friend, Pete Peterson. And now I don't say Pete Peterson. It wasn't Pete Peterson. But it was Peterson, his last name. I've got pictures on there to show if you want to see pictures, you know. But anyhow, they went and shot that man. I don't know how many shots. I forgot how many shots. This Louis Mattern shot that guy, shot the cop. And then they went on a hunt. And I was on the radio, and I heard all the cops talk. They'd come in, but they couldn't hear each other, but I could hear them. Then I could tell. And then this guy said, I seen that car in such and such a place. I seen that car in such and such a place. And then I could hear that. Then I could tell the cops. And they went towards Minot, and they caught him in Minot. We got pictures of when they caught him. Then he got back to Rugby and had court and trial for many days. And he gave us a real bad time. We had a bad time. And what was so bad, the Father Kallenberg was so sympathetic for him, felt so sorry for him. He was such a good friend of his mother, and he wanted to get him off all the time. And they even come to my house in the kitchen, and he wanted to get a good lawyer and get him off. I said that was premeditated. He had the gun. He knew the place. It was his car. His friend, the friend he had was a kid that didn't pass the army. I can't remember. See, when I get excited, I can't remember names. Sometimes I'll remember those names. But anyhow, this kid was real honest. He told me everything. And then I would tell the cops. He was downstairs, and Louis Mattern was upstairs. He would tell them nothing. And this kid told us everything. We found out everything. But he still got prison. But our lawyer was Conrad Sigler. I think it was Sigler. Then he would want to help get him off. And the priest and the mother. And nobody wanted to do that. He killed the man. They got him in prison. They still kept working and trying to get him off. Then even Father came to the house, wanted me to sign to get him off. And I wouldn't sign. But they got him out, and he moved to Minot. Then he took care of his mother. He had a big explosion, and it blew his eyes out, and it killed his mother. Explosion had happened. And they won the case. They won the case that the city lost, that the stove exploded. So that's what we have to believe, you know. Then you know what? He died. About a month or so he died. So I said it was a God's blessing. Father said, shut up. He got mad at me because I said, that was a God's blessing. I said, God won. He pushed, you know, he was a bad guy in my book. Just a young boy of 19 years old. That's the way it goes. Yeah, I can't remember everything just perfectly because we had a rough time. We had lots of hard work.
Yeah.
And Walt would have still liked to have been sheriff.
Yeah.
Then we got out of there and he started up a business. Big business. Done real well. But then he got we had Miltenberger sales and service. But he got sick, he got heart problems. He smoked continuously, smoked all the time. And then all his vessels got down so thin, just like a thread. The blood vessels the blood wouldn't go through, then he had blockage. So then he had a surgery, 3 bypasses. And they said he would live another 8 years. And that's what happened. And he had the surgery, had the 3 bypasses. And he went out and just drummed up his business like you wouldn't believe. We had a real good business. But he got sicker and sicker and sicker. And then we sold it. We rented it out to John Jelsing. He bought it in the end. And then we went to not California, to Yuma, Arizona, where our daughter lived. Thea was living there. And then he passed out. They took him to the hospital, and he lived for a week, and he died. And we had to bring him home on the train, on the airplane, in the box. And we buried him out here in the Rigby Cemetery.
What year was that?
1986. December the 5th, he died. He's only 73. And that's 20 years ago. Oh, that's the way that went. I haven't told you anything about his folks. That they moved out west, and they were in Clarkston. Lived out there. His brother Joel lives out there. Anyway, then we lived on the Evil place for 3 years. After we left that home place, he had gotten a farm from his dad, and he lost that. And then from the Evil place, we moved to the Auble place, and we lived there 1 year.
The awful place?
Auble.
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 Okay.
A-B-O-U-T, something like Auble, yeah.
Okay.
Something like that. A-L-E, something like that. And then from there, we got a farm in the Anderson place. And we stayed there 5 years and never got a crop.
Really?
No rain. No garden. Can you imagine? No vegetables, no potatoes, no nothing.
Yeah.
Then we got it from friends. I don't know how they made it, but he did play a lot of parties and songs and weddings and that.
Your dad did?
Yeah, and then we had cows. We had as high as 20 cows, and we had us kids milk those cows. And then you know what he did? He went and got a Guernsey bull, and that's a yellow type of a bull. It's supposed to be rich in butter fat. And I mean, he was a smart man, because you see, when he was a kid, they sent him away to be a priest, you know, and he got a lot of education. He went to school for 3 years, and he quit being a priest, got married. And so he had a good education. He was smart in writing and reading and arithmetic, and some of the Germans couldn't write. My mother couldn't even sign her name. And a lot of her brothers and sisters, they couldn't write. But he knew everything. He could write, he could go to court, you know, and read the papers, and he was real sharp that way. So anyhow, he got this bull calf, and then all the cows, next calves were all yellow. We got to the Anderson place. And then he made us all milk in little bottles, in a shoe box, put bottles in there, vanilla bottles, and milk, put cow's name on each bottle. And we took it to Rugby and tested them. And we had Hornstein cattle, and they were only 2 and 3 butter fat. And the yellow ones were all 6 and 5 and way up butter fat, that rich milk. And we used to get 20 gallons of cream every week. And cream was high priced, and that's what we lived on. That's how we got by.
What year was that, or what years were those?
Well, that was from 1933. We moved off of there. So it was Darlene was born in 32. Leonard was born in 30. He was born on that farm. And in 33, we moved to Knox then. And Bobby was born in 34. That was in Knox. But we lived on this farm all the 30s in the farm of Anderson's. And I had to stay home for everything, for washing clothes when she had a baby, or washing and ironing and plowing. And I missed a lot of school. And, you know, Margaret, she was a kind of bashful, slow, couldn't work very good. I'd always call her lazy. Leo couldn't even drive a horse. He was the boy. He was third oldest. My dad couldn't trust him with a plow with 7. I plowed with 7 horses. Put the whole field and all 4 land we had, quarters of land. And I had to plow all that, and I had to miss all that school. And when I did go to school, I liked school, but I got up to the 8th grade. I did go make the 8th grade, but I didn't write my exams. I was scared I wasn't going to pass anyway. And I thought, what's the use anyhow? I wasn't going to go to high school. I didn't know then I wasn't going to go, you know. And nobody made me. They liked it when I stayed home. So...
Can you tell me what you do remember about going to school?
Pardon?
Can you tell me what you remember about when you did get to go to school? What was the schoolroom like?
Oh, school was beautiful, nice. We even had a bus, and we drove with the team. And we had the horses on the school bus, and I drove home with the bus. That was the last year I drove. But before that, we used to have to walk in the spring year. We had to walk. But when it was cold bad weather, we drove with the bus. It was about 2 miles to school. That wasn't very far, but I remember we left the school. We had to drive the bus and leave the horses out, put them in the barn. And there was Margaret, Leo, Lena, Helen, Pete, and George. They all went to school there. I think Joe even started there. I can't quite remember that. But they all went to school. And like if we butchered or anything, I'd stay home. And my big problem was my mother and dad didn't get along. And I was scared he was going to kill her. I was scared he was going to kill her. So we were butchered or anything, I had to stay home. So one day he says to me, "Will you run down there and see if the cattle broke out?" And when I run down there, check, I said the cows didn't break out. I turned around, run back. Here he was in the house fighting me either. We was butchering a pig, you know. See, that's why I got scared. And you know, because he played so many parties and dances, she was jealous, you know. She accused him of other women, and that's what my big problem was. I got to be like a psychiatrist or psychologist, trying to make peace in the family. And I was only 15, 16 years old.
Must have been hard for you.
Wow, it was terrible. Yeah. It ruined my brain, that's what it did. And the different times, you know, he even took us all to Grandma's house and had a man come there, his friend. And she was pregnant with Darlene, holding little Leonard in her arms, left her all alone, and made us all go there. And I even got company. Brenda's girl came to visit, and she went along. We had a Model T for it, and we were all in that Model T. Took us over to Grandma's. He did this so she'd shut up. Wouldn't accuse him and argue and say things bad about him. He didn't want to be a bad man. He didn't want to be bad. He was driven crazy. And she was insane when she was pregnant. She was terrible when she was pregnant. She wasn't well either, you know. And so when we come home, and after we come, it was dark already. We had all those cows to milk. And here, I felt sorry for my company. They were worried when they get home they're going to get bawled out. They got home so late. Anyhow, this Frank Sitter was there. And anyhow, I went in the house. She had the door locked. Frank never got in there. And she was crying, and she was holding Leonard. And I took Leonard and I put him to bed. And she said, in German, she said, "Was da liederlich noch onstill," you know, what, that good for nothing, what he doesn't start, you know, that's what she said on German, you know. But she called him a good for nothing, a lazy, and he wanted to be good Simon because he was his mother's favorite kid, and he was supposed to be a priest, and he was such a good person. All the people liked him. We liked him, and he was a good man. Very intelligent. But he had a temper. He hit her in the mouth. The blood came out. sometimes, one time. My sister Lena was kneeling, praying, "Mother, Mother, be quiet, be quiet." This is all in my head. And so we moved to Knox. This John Gaffrey is a wonderful person, and he got Dad this farm. I've been so happy about that. He got Dad that good farm. We got a farm. We got off of that farm. All sand all the time, and never had a crop. We got down there. We had all this sheep and garden and good crops. But that guy wouldn't sell the farm. He made enough money. He saved a lot of money. My dad wouldn't give my mother nothing, but he saved it. Anyhow, when we moved there, she was happy too. We got to this big house. There was bed bugs in the house, so we had to steam them out, and we stayed about a week or two in the garage, and we slept in the garage. There was a big, nice garage there. We had beds in there, and we stayed overnight over there. I remember how hard I worked, made beds for all, and we cooked, and then we still had to milk all our cows all the time, you know. Of course, Leo milked, and Margaret milked, but when Lena come out to the barn to milk, and she had a pail, if the cow looked at her, she went in the manger. She just couldn't milk like the rest of us, you know. Helen wasn't so bad. She'd milk. Oh, I tell you, it was awful how we were raised. We were so poor. You can't believe how poor we were. And he was so proud he wouldn't go on welfare. Take a cent. He got on the seed and weed loans, and he paid all that back. But then when Leo got big, went in the army, he sent all his money home to his mother. That was her happiest day in her life. And she bought herself a Davenport and a sewing machine. And spend all his money. When Leo came home from the war, 5 years, you know, she had it all spent, and Pa would not pay him back. He said he didn't send it to me. He would not pay it back. There was arguments there all the time. But Leo just went back out and got another job. He done well, you know. He got a good job. He had a lot of money. He become well-to-do. But that was the way it was. And then, of course, we had a Maytag. Then we finally got a Maytag. We didn't have to rub the clothes on the board anymore. But I used to have to wash them on the board.
Did you make your own soap to do laundry?
Huh?
Did you make your own soap?
Yeah, we made our own soap. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And we had butchered everything, did our own butchering, had everything ourselves, what we had to do, you know. Bake our own bread. You know, my mother was a good cook. She was a good baker. No education, but sometimes you put liniment in for vanilla. People were such nice people, and gave us that farm. It was a Mr. Mid had one girl, and this woman had 6 years of college. She corrected our name from, we'd say Bush, but it's supposed to be on Bosch. She corrected us, and she got along real good with my mother. Couldn't talk English, and she preached to her and tell her to do this and that, because she was very stubborn. My mother she wouldn't take it from me, you know. We wanted her to talk English and teach her, but she took it from Mrs. Steen. And Mrs. Steen came over a lot, and she felt so sorry. They liked us, Miss Steens. And Oscar was a nice guy. We got along good with him. But what I was going to say about John Gaffrey, he was such a good man. He got us that farm. And to make all things an understanding, he came to me one time and he said, "Why don't you tell your mother not to run your dad down when you're out in company?" Can you imagine? I was married then, had 3 children, and this man comes and tells me she was still running my dad down. He says, I basted him up and built him up, and she runs him down. He says, not fair. He says, he's a good man. That's the way a man can get a wife, and he should get a divorce, shouldn't he? What if you get a wife like that? See, the kids don't know that. The rest of the kids, they were so busy they didn't even pay attention. But I did. I suffered it through to the ground. I just couldn't understand. You know, I never wanted to be like my mother. That's how bad it was. She was a good woman, but this kind of really proved it when he said that. Why don't you tell her to quit running your dad down? I says, don't you know that's why we don't get along? I says, don't you know, I've told her, just say it once. Say Simon is a good man, I say to her. Just once. I was becoming a psychiatrist, you know. Psychologist. I was making peace all the time. I suffered over that. My whole life I suffered over that. Kind of neglected my own life.
Do you remember them ever getting along, your parents?
Huh?
Do you remember them ever getting along or having a good time together, your parents?
Well, how did he get 12 kids?
Good point.
The people were different in those days. They never loved, they never hugged. You know, one day he had his bowels removed, and he was in the hospital. So Walt and I were going to go up and visit him. We got up there, and my mother was with us, and she got in first. When we got in there, she was kissing him. And I shocked, and I went out the back door. Just sucked. My body was just... She kissed him, and the first time I'd seen him, and we were already married. You see how it goes? These are the things I based on, because I never thought much of myself. I got so hurt. And then I just read another note long ago where Walt said, why don't you think more of yourself? When I got married to him, he was good for me. He was a lover. You kissed from morning until night, all day long. When he come, when he went. He was a great lover. I never had that at home. And then he'd always correct me. He'd say, now you don't say this, or you don't do this, or when I vote, you can vote like this. And like we go to vote, he would vote Democrat and I would vote Republican. He'd tell me to do this, and I would do it. I was so obedient, I still am, so obedient. If you tell me to jump in a well, I think I'd jump in there. That's the way I am. It's like yield, and a dog will yield. That's, you know how you train a dog? Well, I was a trained dog, I'll tell you. Mostly I worked under him, you know.
Is that something your parents instilled in you?
Huh?
Is that something your parents instilled in you, to be obedient?
Why, sure. I was trained. He was a trainer. He trained. How do you suppose I went out in that field with 7 horses and could plow, and he wouldn't let me make a slip on the end. When you turn, you might slip, you know. A lot of people do that, you know. But I never made one because he told me not to make one. Leo couldn't do it. Margaret couldn't begin to do it. He tried Leo. That was his boy. He wanted a boy so bad. He couldn't do nothing with Leo.
Was that a disappointment for your father?
Sure. He couldn't let him. The wild horses, you know, we drove, cut grass and hay. And we had 2 wild, big stallions, beautiful horses. And the wilder they were, the better I liked them. And I could cut all that hay down, you know. He couldn't do it with Leo. See, I got this proof. Now, Leo could say something else. He could deny it, what I'm saying. Because he does say, he's Margaret and I did this and Margaret and I did that. He never says, listen, I did that. He never does that. But him and Margaret were two of a kind. When they could smoke together, I would never smoke in all my life. But they would cheat and smoke. And when my folks take me along to Grandma's and they stayed home, they smoked and they did everything.
Did they get in trouble for doing those things?
Sure. What trouble? My mother never slapped a child. Scolded him a little bit. She wasn't the trainer.
So your dad was the main
Dad,
disciplinarian?
he was the trainer. He was strict as can be. Yeah, he was strict.
What kind of punishments did you guys have?
Well, one day, Lena was making the sandwiches and I wasn't going to school anymore. I was washing clothes and I had the boiler on, stove to get the water hot. And Lena comes out and takes my boiler and pushes it back and puts her frying pan on. And I come out and I saw that and I said, it's just about boiling. I want this water to boil and then you can have the whole stove. I pushed it back, pushed her frying pan back, put my water back on. She comes in and I was standing there cutting bread. And she comes in and she hit at me and she hit right in that knife. Cut herself open here. And nobody saw what had happened. Nobody did. I didn't even know I'd done it. And she went right in the bedroom and was bleeding and her mother tied her up. And I took the kids to school with the bus and come home, sat down and ate breakfast. And she said, if it would have been one of the others, he'd lick them, but he won't touch her. That's what she said. So here he comes with a great big strap, and he beat me till I passed out. Then you know what I did? I pouted for 3 days. I went up in the attic and sat up in the attic. I didn't eat or sleep or wherever I slept. Didn't eat. And finally, here he comes upstairs and he said, we got to haul hay, Elizabeth. You got to come down and haul hay. What was I going to do? Sit upstairs for the rest of my life? Imagine a predicament you can get into. What are you going to do as a child, huh? I was mad at her for that because I heard her say it when she said that.
Yeah.
That's a fine mother, isn't it? They didn't know what happened. Nobody asked me what happened. Elizabeth hit me, cut me with a knife. Sounds kind of rough, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Well, it wasn't meant to be, so I could say to myself, I didn't mean to do it. Mm-hmm. I was talking to God, you know. I said, I didn't do it. When I ever have anything, I worry about anything, it wasn't my fault. Was it my fault? It wasn't my fault. Then this goes away. Yeah. Then there's nothing to it. That's how you can heal yourself. Or when you worry, just pray. If you pray, who are you talking to? It takes care of itself. That's how you get by. Till you're 92.